Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude at Young Mystic, and welcome to today's edition of Beyond the Charts. With me today, of course, is Martee Hibbs. You can find his work at bullshift2020.com. Marty, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Thank you, JC. Doing well. Not bad at all, actually, sir.
Crazy times. And we're seeing more and more news suggesting that things aren't right in our economy. People are waking up to the fact that, something doesn't add up here, Marty. There's so many news. A lot of people are wanting us to talk about the silver and gold. It's been acting up here in the last couple of weeks, and people are thinking now that we've hit the 30 in silver, if we're going to see major changes, perhaps to the banking institutions that were shorting silver, and where that goes here in the next little while. And oddly enough, you called it a couple of months ago here that we would be crossing at that $28 mark very soon. You had shown this to our audience, and here we are today. Before we start in all of that, are you tracking anything specifically here this week and moving into next week? The BRICS just announced their national payment system just a couple of weeks ago. China is de-dollarizing, dumping even more bonds. What's going on in your view here? Let's give us a recap of the economy as it stands today, Marty.
Well, globally, we are, I think, transitioning slowly. It's like a slow, steady bleed. It's boring how slow it's getting, and people are impatient as a rule. People, when they first heard about the whole 2030 agenda back in 2020, they want it to kind of happen now because that's just the way we are as humans. I think we're basically, when they talked about the Cbdc's 4 or 5 years ago, they figured we'd have them within a year, and it's not like that. And it's the same thing with the wars right now, what's going on with Ukraine, Middle East. It's just so slow. It bores you to death. It's so bad how things are just slowly moving along. And if you go back to 2020, do you remember when I was standing behind a lady at the grocery store one day in 2020? It was probably close to Christmas time. And I remember you had to stand 6 feet apart. And there's a lady in front of me, and she's talking to her friend. And she goes, "Oh, I'm so happy 2020 is over." Like, that's it. It's all done. No, I don't think so. So that's the problem. I think most people want things now. It's impatience. I think maybe because we only have so many years to live on this planet, we just can't deal with the slowness at how things work. So a lot of people I talk to go, "Oh, the Ukraine war is all a done deal." Not necessarily. I don't believe that for a second. I think the escalation is still going to come. It's going to get a lot worse. I think the Middle East is going to be worse. It's all, in my opinion, going to just completely tear at the cloth, the fabric of society. And we're just going to keep our head down, keep going. I think it's just going to continually deteriorate. I mean, things from the interest rates, which are destroying the average family, both in the US and Canada. We see what's happening. And of course, this year when they came out and said, "Oh, we're going to do 8 rate cuts." Well, here we are almost June 1st. And 0 rate cuts. So, you know what? It's unfortunate, but you just got to have that mindset, because then you won't be shocked. If you see things slowly continue to deteriorate the way they're going, you'll probably fare better, because it won't play with your mental capacity of disappointment every time something is supposed to happen and doesn't happen. And so, yeah, we've got a lot of things. I was talking to a lady yesterday, one of our clients in New Zealand, and she said starting May 30th, there's 4 or 5 major banks that are ready to roll out the CBDCs down there. It's in the news. It's on the committee. It's she's been in touch with them, and it looks like they're ready to be one of the first ones to actually go ahead and roll out their CBDCs. So
right. There's a couple of trial balloons on that front, and we heard news about Cuba also just a couple of weeks ago. They were having issues with their ATMs, their bankings. It's still not making mainstream news. I asked Jim Willie, he was on the show a couple of weeks ago. He's in Latin America also, South America, asking him if he had more news. And he says, no, they're still being very tight-lipped. All we've seen is a couple of reports on CBC that some of the ATMs were down. Do you have anything else coming out of Cuba that suggests that things might be on the verge there also of implementing their CBDC?
Well, I read the article about the Cuba one, but my personal thoughts on the whole thing is it's almost like the Canadian truckers thing. There's little bonfires being set all over the place, and I think they're more like test trials. We know it's going to be a global phenomena when they finally try and bring in CBDCs globally, because the central banks of the world, which is basically the same central bank system as we have in Canada, whether it's the US, wherever it is, they're all tied together.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a matter of being ready. But the slow bleed again is that I remember years ago when they first introduced ChargeX. I don't know if you're old enough, you used to go, is that cash or ChargeX?
Right.
People were really, against it. They didn't like it. They didn't want it. And here we are now with most people have a digital card in their wallet with regard to their banking. Nobody carries cash much anymore.
Right.
So it's not going to be a big transition. And the convenience factor is going to make the average person be very friendly towards it because nobody wants to carry cash or most people don't.
Right.
The main issue here is that once the cash goes, so do all of the private deals. So do all the things that we all are guilty of, which is getting a few deals here and there, buying something, maybe like a car and getting it, $500 knocked off the bill or something like that.
Right.
So they're closing all these little loopholes. And I believe it's coming. I don't know if it's going to be successful. There's a chance that it may fail in certain areas. It's really a big ask to be able to try and bring the entire globe into a one world system. It's not going to be an easy task, but they're moving forward, and I think it's just a matter of time. But the way I think it's going to be rolled out mostly is issues where it's the old problem, reaction, solution,
Right.
where we'll come to the government and say, hey, the banks we're having issues. The bank system is down. There's a power grid outage or whatever. Please help us. Just like with COVID. And they'll say, go home, relax. Don't worry about it. We'll look after you. And I think that's the mentality that people are used to the government looking after them. And unfortunately, I'm not a believer of that. I really think it's all perpetrated and planned that way. And it looks like they're trying to assist us. Yeah, most people that, we grew up believing in the government. We grew up believing in our priests and our politicians and our police officers. That's just the way we've been educated. And the reality, I think, is coming out that it's not quite that way. And it's kind of sad, but, that's what I'm feeling anyway.
Well, there's also all the trust that's been abused in the last couple of years, and so that reality is shifting very quickly. You just mentioned this trial balloon to get us into the CBDCs, whether or not it would work. Oddly enough, this new WHO treaty also appears to not have worked. Now, presumably, the pandemic was a lead up here to digital currencies, wanting everybody to get into this digital passport type of thing for COVID. That didn't seem to work. And now this WHO treaty also is falling apart. So we're seeing here that their plans to get into CBDC might be hindered here with the reality of what you're just suggesting. People are waking up to all of this and they're wanting to choose a different route. You mentioned 2020 earlier. I wanted to bring this up. I saw this meme earlier today. I'm like, oh, this is cool. No one is forcing you to have sex with me, but if you refuse, you don't get to work. So that was, of course, Harvey Weinstein. And somebody correlated that with our prime minister here in Canada, not forcing you, just taking away everything until you consent. So, yeah, that was the craziness of 2020, 2021. And now with the trial balloons of the bird flu popping up, we'll see how this transcribes here in the next couple of months.
Mentioning the WHO, you just go back to it. I read an article this week where actually Canada has signed on to it. They have signed on already. Yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
Right. Give them full power over your
we're knee deep here. Yeah, we're knee deep here in Canada. How long that lasts, whether or not we have a snap election here, as we just saw in the UK, we might have one here in Canada too. And if you look at the polls, apparently the Conservatives would have a supra majority here in Canada. So we'll see. We'll keep our fingers crossed for that. But let's just look at inflation. Before we get into some of the charts, I wanted to share just a couple of news items from earlier this week. 78% of consumers now consider fast food to be a luxury purchase due to how expensive the meals have become. It's a Bidenomic miracle, interesting enough. This one here too, average U.S. vehicle hits 12 years of age here as inflation takes a toll. That's a big indicator as well. The Fed versus the Treasury, all roads to lead to inflation. This was yesterday on Zero Hedge. And CTV News here is glamorizing Canadians who just want to stay at home. They don't, but they're finding new ways of telling you you're too poor to travel this summer. And finally, the National Post. Joe Oliver here was saying that Trudeau Liberals have eroded all 5 pillars of prosperity. Now, Canada is an indication. It's not by any means the bellwether for the rest of the world, but all of these inflation articles are. Where do we lead with this? On one hand, we're saying it seems to be slow going. There seems to be nothing happening. Yet at the same time, our money is eroding faster than perhaps the change is occurring here in our realm. Where do you think this inflation goes? Are we close to maybe that hyperbolic movement now and that big crash everybody's expecting? Where are we on this inflation front, Marty?
Okay, so that's a good one. There's lots of parts to unwrapping this. First of all, as far as inflation, the best way I think that you can look at inflation is to go to the store, just go to the grocery store. I am absolutely shocked at one of the most expensive things I see at the store these days. JC, you know what it is? Water.
What?
To go buy a bottle of water, it's $3 to $4 to go buy a bottle of water. We live in the Great Lakes, the largest freshwater supply in the world, and we pay $3 to $4 for a bottle of water. Like, it's ridiculous. Now, this was I believe a service station, but beside it, I had a choice. You know, the skinny cans of Coca-Cola, they come up with now these new little shrinkflation cans.
Yep.
2 cans for $7. Seriously? Then the other one, of course, is you go to the restaurants, which, we're all Canadians, eat out a lot in restaurants, just like the Americans or the U.S. citizens. But you go to the restaurant, this is what really kind of ticks me a little bit. You walk up to a counter on a self-serve place, a coffee shop, and you're presented with a 15, 18, or 25% tip on top of their inflated prices.
Yeah.
Now, so as a rule, you go to the restaurant, if something costs $20, it's $40. Why? Because you got a 13% tax on the food, and then you got another 15 to 25% tip. So, like, it's getting really ridiculous. And yet the inflation rate is supposed to be 3%, which is total BS. It's just absolutely. Anybody that believes that, and I think one of the biggest problems we're still having is that, unfortunately, the biggest control mechanism that any body, government-wise, has over its citizens is mainstream media, because they own it. And one of the main things to control the people or your citizens is to control the media. If you own the media, you control the people, because, again, as I mentioned before, with our religion, with our schooling system, with our police and our priests and everything else, we were taught, especially as Canadians, but a lot of people were, to trust and respect that they're here to look after you. Anyway, I forgot what I was just going to say, but the idea
the power of the media to manipulate the perception.
Because most people still trust CTV and CBC and CHCH and all the local stations. They do. Yeah. And they will not go on the other stations because they're told, oh, you don't go on. Sorry, I'm just at a loss of words here. That station that you do after here, what's it called?
How do you mean?
The other alternative media, the other station that they don't block you.
Oh, Rumble feed.
Rumble. Okay, so but most people won't go on there because they figure everything on there is conspiracy, right? So for that reason, they don't get to see any of the truth. Now, X, of course, has done really well with regard to having an open thing, that if you have an open mind, you might want to listen to some things on there. But if you're listening to mainstream media, unfortunately, you're just getting what you're going to get, more of the same, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
But the inflation thing is going to get worse. I've never believed for a second that they're going to reduce rates. I still think there may be a situation where they'll reduce rates temporarily. And the only reason I say that is because if we get to a point coming into a new election where Mr. T has to do what he has to do, he'll do it. Like his comments there last month, he said he's going to build 4 million new homes. How about just 40,000 would be fine, right?
Right.
Second largest country on the planet, in the world. 93% of it is owned and sealed by the crown. It's not available to anybody. 6 to 7% is accessible, but we can't house 38 million people. Yeah. Something is not right with that picture.
Yeah. You mentioned the bottled water. Let me bring up this chart too. Like, I was like, wait, that can't be possible. And then I checked, like, it's right. A quarter pounder from McDonald's in 2020, so just 4 years ago, $2.29. Yeah. Now it's $6.69. Like, that's right. Totally crazy. Yeah. No wonder
that when that comes.
Yeah, there's a glimmer of good news with respect to the mainstream news. This came out just the other day. Is CNN dead? Primetime ratings dropped to 3 decades low. So less and less people are watching them here too, and going to alternative sources, as you said here, to get their news. Let's get into this. I wanted to maybe start with silver here. There was maybe 2 weeks ago, Marty, I saw a couple of guys on here on alternative media suggesting that we would be crossing that $30 mark, that the green light was given, whatever that meant, and that when we did, we would cross this $30 in silver, and that could be a critical point for some of the banks shorting silver. Now, the last time you were on, we were talking about this $28 threshold that you said we were going to cross here very soon. Of course, we've just crossed it. What do you make of these banks shorting silver? Is there a dead bank walking now? We've been over 30 for over a week. Is there something happening in the background maybe we don't know about? What are your thoughts on that before we get into the charts?
Okay, so, of course, being a Canadian, unfortunately, I've worked all my life in the U.S. markets. We don't really have a commodity market per se in Canada, other than Winnipeg Exchange, which deals with some grains. So you go where the action is. And all my life, since 1986, I've worked for the U.S. firms, whether it's Refco, all the major U.S. firms are where the brokerage firms are, and I follow their economics and their financial system and their banking system. So it's hard to really justify trying to compare Canada, even though it's the same central banking system. We've only got like 6 major banks here. That's all we've got. As far as the banking system's dead man walking, here is my thoughts on it. We have thousands of second-tier banks in the U.S. And years ago, we had tens of thousands, and we had the SNLs, and they all went bust. Central banks don't do straight lending to corporations that need debt. They need loans. They don't do loans for mortgages. That, again, is regional banks in the U.S. So going forward with the CBDCs, the need for regional banks is not going to be there.
Right.
So I think a lot of these banks will either fail or they will be gobbled up by the same thing as like the old Amazon trick, gobble up what's good and then throw away the rest.
Right. Do you think that's what's happening perhaps here in Canada? You just mentioned the major 6. TD Bank's in trouble here for money laundering. And I think they fired a couple of people over the weekend, just a couple of days ago. I saw that in the news. I thought this was funny. Not funny, but when I first heard the news, I was like, oh, come on. If I were the CEO of TD Bank, I'd probably be looking at all the other CEOs who are probably involved in similar activities. If you read the report, and this is not conspiracy theory. Many banks have paid major fines for exactly this, money laundering over the years. So this is not conspiracy theory. My point is, are they now starting to attack the smaller banks who are not going to be allowed to play moving forward in this consolidation towards CBDC? Is that what we're seeing with TD here? They're kind of like pushing them on the side or maybe trying to gobble them up. What are your thoughts on this TD story?
Well, here's the main thing. First thing you look at, what are we looking at? We're looking at Google. We're looking at Yahoo Finance.
Yeah.
So anything that's on there that you're seeing, I believe is there because they want you to see it.
Right.
If you go on and look for some deep conspiracy sort of things, considered conspiracy that we're looking for, you're not going to find it on Google or Facebook or Yahoo or any of these channels. So the point you got to look at here is exactly that if it's there because they want you to see it. Just like Trudeau with what bill was that? I can't remember which number, 22, where we're not allowed to use news from the U.S. But he did it in such a way that protect Canadians, right?
Yeah.
So yes, I believe that they're trying to give the banks a black eye, so that when it finally comes to pass, people will say, "Oh yeah, those banks are corrupt anyway," not knowing that part of the central bank system.
Right.
So yeah, now getting to your other point, you were talking about silver. I don't believe these banks will be doing much in shorting silver. And the reason I say that is because you got to remember some of the biggest banks that are involved with this are people that are what we call custodians. So you take people like the JP Morgan, which is the custodian for SLV and these ETFs, right?
Right.
They actually hold the actual silver. So for that reason, they have it there and they can shift it around and move it and they can sell it because, again, you're talking about an unlimited resource of money. So they can go in and crush the market and sell. Anybody that doesn't understand the way the futures markets works is it's created with two partners, two people. There's a buyer and there's a seller. That's it. There's no limit to how many contracts you can create or short. So if you've got 10,000 people lined up to buy silver at $28 and we're now at 32, if the bank decided, they could go in and put enough silver contracts in the market, fill everybody. That means all the way down to 28 are getting their orders, and they just keep pounding it. And all of a sudden, the floor is gone because there's nobody beneath there trying to buy it.
Right.
And this is where the market gets crushed because it's like, and I might have used this analogy with you, if you and I are playing poker in a private room, if you've played poker, you know generally that 2 or 3, 4 hours of playing poker, it's back and forth and back. You win, I win, correct?
Right.
And if I decided, okay, 2 o'clock in the morning, I want to go home, and I know you have about $1,000. If I put my hand in my pocket and pulled out $20,000 cash and laid it on the table, what's going to happen to you?
I'm priced out of the game. I have to go.
You're gone.
Yeah, I'm gone.
Right. How many times can you go all in and possibly not lose?
Right. Exactly.
So the idea is with these banks, they have the ability to sell $1 billion worth of paper, silver, if necessary, to bring the price to where they want it to go. So for that reason, they've done it. They've been fined many, many, many times. But I don't see the individual banks like the banks in Canada. They don't get involved with that stuff. I really don't think they will. It's just too dangerous for them.
I wasn't referring to TD Bank in this particular case. Just generally speaking, if there was a dead bank walking in the back, people were suggesting that maybe Bank of America could be underwater with these shorts here as soon as we cross the $28 silver. And with respect to the power of manipulation you just described, we haven't went under 28. We're still tracking here. Let me bring up. We're at 32 right now. So I thought that was interesting. I saw this other post earlier today. I'm not sure what to make of it here. This is from Peter Spina on Goldseek. He's saying nearly 85 million digital ounces of IOU silver traded in New York futures over the past 45 minutes. So this could be one of those attempts here to bring that candle down here from that 32 mark, but still we're not under 28 yet, and this has been a week now, so there could be still some more pressure going on there. Let me bring up the this chart here. This one I want to talk to you about. Are we close here, as this gentleman is suggesting, to a breakout close to 40? Last time you were here, you had mentioned the timeline for your 28. We were maybe off by a week or two, but eventually we hit that 28 mark that you were looking at. Do you want to bring up your trade view here for silver? And let's look at where we're going next here. Are we going towards 40 here, or are we going to see a big smackdown going back under the moving averages? I had Bill Holter on just last week, and he was looking at the MACDs for silver and gold, and he was suggesting that something was trading off here and that we couldn't stay in that pattern for very long. Either we would have a crazy upside very soon or a crash on the other side, but he was betting on the upside. So
okay,
let's bring up your chart.
Go here and pull up my chart. Share screen. This is a tricky one because, as I said before, there we go. All right, so share. Okay, so let's go to silver. Now, I can't remember exactly when we were on before, but we were somewhere in this range here. I think we're around 25. This was the bottom. So the green box here is the area that a support level, but it's a buy area as well. You can see my screen, okay? Can you, JC?
Yes, sir, I can. Go ahead.
Okay, let me just go on here so I can see you. So the idea here is that we were saying we're going to see the 28. Now, it went through the 28, but it came back, which means it overshot the runway. Then we put this new box in here. This is what the Oracle does. It gives these ranges. Now, while I'm on the subject, not a big deal. Somebody who's mentioned, oh, the boxes are ridiculously big. Well, the thing is, it depends on which chart you got. If I go to a 4-hour chart, yeah, they're huge. If I go to a monthly chart, there's the box right there. So you know, it's not a good thing to judge it by. So here's what's happening. This is our area now that we were looking at possibly getting back to consider buying it. This is a buy zone, the green one. There is our next target. So our next target is up close to $40. And right now, if we can take today's high out, take this top out in the next day or two, there's a good chance on this run, which could be within the next 2 weeks, that we're going to see high 30s on this chart.
Okay. What are we sitting at now? 32.
Now we're at 32.08. Now, one other thing that we mentioned is today, you look at these numbers here, we're now getting to the point where we're starting to get almost $2 moves on a day, where it started out as $1, then $2, and then eventually it'll get even higher as the volatility kicks in. We have right now a hard marker here, which is kind of like a short-term ceiling with the double line on here, up around the $40 mark. I think on this run, if we continue to run, we're probably not going to get much past 40 before you get a major correction. But right now, once we clear this area, our next target is the high 30s. And then, like I said, a hard stop up around 40. But this is the beginning. Going forward, I really think we're going to see a lot more volatility. That's the key, and it's going to get very choppy.
A couple of years ago, Cliff was tracking silver, gold, and Bitcoin in his Webbot data, and he had predicted a time that we would enter where we would see this hyperinflation. We would see the closing of military bases around the world. We're kind of seeing it now. We would see food riots. So some of those temporal markers for that data set are appearing now. But what was interesting about gold and silver is that the Webbot data was picking up something that hadn't occurred before. These $1-a-day moves, then $2-a-day moves, then $5-a-day moves. It appears that we've just entered that track now when you're looking at your boxes. He sent me something. This was 2 days ago, or wait, 27. So yesterday morning. In his last run, he was talking about 3 months from now. So in the 3-month window, so I don't know if you can extrapolate a little bit higher here on your box, but he was looking at, or at least the Webbot data was suggesting that we could be hitting 50 here within the next 3 months. And he also talked about 100K, maybe possibly 120K for Bitcoin here before the next pullback. So if you scroll out here for silver, is that 50 mark here plausible too? Looking at the breakout situation we're looking at now? Yeah.
Now, see, here's the deal. With the Oracle, what it does is an algo that we created about 10, 15 years ago. It takes our information and it bases it on time, volatility, and price. And based on those, it gives me the number. So this is why back here, we suggest we're going to see 28. And at that point, we hadn't seen 28 for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And once we get there, then we're starting to get this uptick where we're starting to see $1 a day, $2 a day. And as it goes higher, it just makes sense. The more volatile it gets, the choppier it's going to get, the more vicious the moves are going to be. So right now, I think the highest number I managed to get on the Oracle was about $70 this year. Now, that could change depending on whether or not these come to fruition in the next while and we get up above this $40 level. Then we're going to maybe be seeing $3, $4, $5 a day. And it just makes sense. As the more volatile it gets, the wider the swings and the crazier things will get. So, yes, I think right now, the month of June, we'll see high 30s easily. And we're coming into June right now. It could even pass what I expect. It could do even more. But
it's funny you mentioned June. In a separate report here, Cliff was looking at somewhere in the mid-June, 15th or 20th of June, as a huge shock awakening to what he called the normies, or people who are sleepers. And he thought it had something to do with the economy. So there could be a disturbance somehow too, where this is broken out of its pattern and we're talking it in a big way. It could be something happening to the dollar itself too. We see all of these tit for tat moves with Russia now sanctioning and threatening to pull back some American money out of their banking system in a tit for tat move for what the US just did in the last month. So, and who knows? So we're going to see more volatility here in Ukraine. It appears that we're sending more troops there. France is there, and apparently Canada also. Yeah.
NATO's been directed to go in there. Yeah. And that we have a military contact, and he is a lifer, and he's been feeding us information that's been very reliable, actually, quite. And one thing that comes to mind is when I did my session that I do with Dick and them all the time was back about March or April. And the guys had seen something in a box that looked similar to a nuclear explosive.
Yeah.
And at that point, there was nothing going on in the Middle East. And I was told by him that that's the Middle East. And during the session, because I was hosting it for them that day, I said, well, guys, I got a different take and I'll throw it out there. And we mentioned that, and they just kind of looked at me. Nobody said anything. But of course, 2 or 3 weeks later, all of a sudden that issue started in the Middle East. So, I believe things are going to continue to accelerate, continue. Unfortunately, I'll get some hate mail for this, but I don't believe things are going to improve, JC, in the next while. We're going down a dark, dirty road. And it's probably going to, we're not even, in my opinion, probably just halfway there yet, or not even that long. Yeah. And it's unfortunate. But if you keep that mindset and you expect it, it's not going to be as shocking as somebody that just thinks things are going to improve tomorrow. The Ukraine war is going to be over, and things are going to be settled.
And if you know that too, you're going to be in a better position to be nimble, to be able to maneuver all of these weird things that are happening. So again, the period of time here, the next 3 months are pretty critical. On our side of things, you just talked about the remote viewers, but from the psychic and the tyros and also the predictive linguistics, it looks like a rough summer, choppy weather all around.
Well, like I said, there's so many irons irons in the fire was the term I was trying to use there, but so many things going on. Like, you got to remember also, we're in a big election year in the US.
For sure.
And we're not sure what's going to happen there, because the bottom line there is to control the power, and whatever it takes, they will do it, whether good or bad. If they have to drop rates 3% or whatever they need to do, they'll do it to maintain, because once they lose power, it's done.
Yeah.
So I think I've heard stories about there's going to be possibility that something's going to happen that's not going to be an election.
Yeah.
And if you look at that, you could say to yourself, well, the only way that may happen is if they bring in like a martial law again or something like that, right? Something, if there's a war, say, for example, they could declare martial law and say, we're just not having an election. It's going to get
or a crazy bird flu.
Or a crazy bird flu. Exactly. Right. And it's funny. I mean, on one side of the coin here, I see so many people, okay, we're past this, it's over, it's done, we know where we stand. And then suddenly you're seeing an ad, don't forget to get your booster shot. Right. Are you serious? Yeah,
exactly. I had a meme the other day on Twitter about a guy who inoculated his family against the bird flu, and it's a picture of him throwing away his TV set outside of the house. So take that for what it's worth, guys. You just mentioned the future forecasting group. Let me share that with the audience members here too. If you're interested in some of this cool stuff, the remote viewing, some of the amazing interviews there that Dick Gallagher and company are producing, please do go check them out. You can find that at futureforecastinggroup.com. Okay, Marty, let's go back to your charts here. Let's flip over to gold now. We're seeing even mainstream analysts, even though they're being conservative in some of their estimates, they're also kind of hinting on mainstream news that something's happening with gold, and we might see much bigger prices in gold here by the end of the year. Even though their estimates are low, at least they're not telling us it's a pet rock, doesn't yield anything. This is the rhetoric we used to hear for the last 10 years. They seem to have been changing their tune. So what, in your view, is prompting this narrative change, and what do you see here in the charts for gold moving forward?
Okay. To me, like, the gold to me is not quite as bullish as silver. Now, for one thing, if you look at the gold silver ratio, let me see if I got the chart here on it. I could pull it up quickly if I do.
I think we were down to 79 yesterday or close like that. We've
so here you go, gold silver. Here's the gold silver ratio. So you see what's happening here. So what this is it's how many ounces of silver does it take to buy an ounce of gold? So, of course, you can see we're up at 92. It took 92 ounces of silver to buy 1 ounce of gold. Today, it's only 73. That generally means that what it means is the ratio between gold and silver is tightening, which means you can actually trade these charts. So, for example, if you were smart, maybe at 92 ounces, you could have taken your 92 ounces of 1 ounce of gold and sold it for 92 ounces of silver. And today you could have bought the ounce of gold back for 73 ounces. But it does show silver strengthening. Now, one of the things that came to my mind was our military guy, the guy I'm talking about, also told me about these new electrical motors or electrical motors he was talking about. How the news is finally coming out. There's some news out there about they are going to be a thing, and it runs on silver. And I think it equates back to when Cliff was talking about at one point about using some kind of liquefied silver or property in silver. I don't know exactly the details, but I remember him talking about it, that it's starting to show up. And he thinks maybe that's one of the reasons silver is plus. As most people will tell you, like silver that comes out of the ground, Keith Neumeyer figures it's like 8 or 9 ounces.
We heard as low. We heard as low as 7 now. So yeah, whether it's 7, 8, or 10, we're still a big difference here between the 73. Exactly.
So here's my personal thought. Now I started in the markets. I became a broker in '86. So I'm long in the tooth. I'm 40 years in this racket, but I kind of stay behind the scenes. I don't really come out in public very much. Gold in its day, in my opinion, was definitely valuable with regard to being money, not currency, but money, mainly because of its properties. The fact that it doesn't rust, the fact that even if they try all they can today to mine it, they can only mine 2 to 3% more each year. So that's a very stationary kind of a number that you can bank on for inflation, to keep it in track with inflation. And the idea is that as they go forward, the gold deposits are less and less, and that they got to dig deeper, and the expenses with fuel and that is more and more. So it's a good monetary system. But personally, and this is just me personally, guys, I believe its day has kind of done with regard to being the main driver. If for some reason, if cryptocurrency works, decentralized cryptocurrency or Bitcoin works, you've got so many more valuable properties in Bitcoin. If it doesn't get to the point where somebody figures out how to hack it or whatever, just because of the divisibility. One problem that I see with gold, well, there's several problems. One is almost every ounce of gold that's ever been mined on the planet is hanging around someone's neck or on someone's finger. It's used as jewelry, and it's a form of wealth. And it holds value. There's no doubt about it. But the other problem is divisibility. Like if it gets to the point where gold costs $5,000 an ounce and you need to transact, what do you do with an ounce of gold? You can't chew off a piece of it or shave off a piece. It's not plus transporting it and security, somebody coming and basically knocking you over or stealing your gold. So there's many things that gold has that I believe going forward is going to limit its ability, because there's so many people that believe in it. They will always be there, because the bottom line is, what do you need when things get bad? So food, shelter, clothing are the 3 main items we all need to survive. We don't need a jet plane. We don't need a cottage. There's so many things we don't need. And you have to be able to transact with people that you're going to give them something of wealth. And if I'm in the desert and I'm starving to death and somebody comes along with a sandwich and I only have an ounce of gold, I'll probably happily give it to them for that sandwich if that's the case, right? So I'm not a hater of gold. I like gold. I think gold is going to hit $3,000 actually by the end of this year. It's very doable, but it's not something that's going to super outpace everything. It's keeping tabs with inflation. And the old adage I used to use before was, if I had a silver dollar and a paper dollar back in 1960s when I was a teenager, you could go to the movie theater either with a paper dollar or silver dollar, and you could get into the movies and buy popcorn. Today, if you go with a paper dollar, you can't. But if you have a silver dollar, you still can, because it's worth $40.
Right.
So
with a paper dollar, you can't even buy the straw anymore.
That's right. You're not even the tax. You can't even buy the pop. Right. So so the idea is wealth preservation. In my opinion, I am a holder of silver and gold, physical, not paper, silver, of course, physical, because it will hold its value. It'll maintain its value.
I'm with you there too. I mean, and I think our audience understands that too. They're not looking at gold as the basis for the next financial system. As you said, it presents different challenges than perhaps it did with respect to the requirements thousands or 2000s years ago. And now we have other technologies, as you just said, the decentralized cryptos that could solve some of those problems. I think what they see it as is wealth preservation, but it's also a transport mechanism to go from the old world into the new world to eventually get into whatever we decide as humans is fair in terms of exchanging energy with each other. You're probably better off using that as a transport mechanism than your dollar. If you look at the inflammation we're seeing now, your dollar is not preserving.
Exactly.
It's not doing the job of preserving your wealth anytime soon. Okay. We talked about gold. Now let's get into the crypto here. Bitcoin's been acting up here too. We have these old Webbot data reports that suggested we would have these $100,000 parties for a while. And now again, looking at the different temporal markers that are hitting us right now, we could be close to that. And that was part of Cliff's last email there about the 100K BTC in the next 3 months. So he's bringing us into July, August, maybe timeframe, maybe as late as September. Is looking at a pullback after that, and maybe 120 soon after. So seems to be interesting, and we're seeing more and more de-dollarization. If you saw this week's, Chinese are also dumping more of those bonds. At some point here, the rubber hits the road. We're getting to this critical mass, I think, as you and I were talking about last time, in terms of people getting of the dollar index and the SWIFT system and choosing alternatives for international trade. So once we get into that critical mass or escape velocity, if Bitcoin is being used for international trade, and that creates a big floor and a big demand, as it used to do for the dollar, we could be in a brand new world here in the next couple of months. So let me bring up your chart here for Bitcoin. What do you have for guidance here?
Okay. So I got a few things to say about this. Is of course, I'm very opinionated, but especially about this. My charts for the past 3 or 4 months, I think even when I was on your channel, I was suggesting that we could have this run until June. And if certain things were met by June, I think we could see a massive, massive move. Now, how do we do this? It's critical that we do this in June, only because of the Oracle numbers, which are generally very accurate. Now, let me just pull the chart up so I can manipulate it a bit. Here's the day chart. And these marks here were marks that we called with our people, with our clients, with our subscribers, and they left them on there. They're very accurate. What I did say is that by the end of May, I want to see Bitcoin above this box here, which is the 72 box, not necessarily above here. And the reason being is because we're going into a new candle, a monthly candle. And if you look at the monthly chart, instead of the day chart, you'll see there that the Oracle has one box. You see this box? This is big enough to fit one of these candles in. Now, I know people will laugh at this, but the point is my target for the past couple of months, and I think even when I was on your show, was mid to high 80s. And I still think that there's a really good chance. But the analogy that I used here is this formation here is like the ninth, going into the ninth inning of a baseball game. And you and I, JC, have a $2,000 bet on who's going to win. Now, if we're coming into the ninth inning and the game is tied, you might say to me, Marty, let's just call the bet off. It's, you can't base it on an overtime goal if it's in hockey, say, for example. It's kind of a crazy bet. So what I'm saying here is my 5-point reverse wave has played out here beautifully, and it is about 85% accurate. I really like that formation. However, what it does say is the rule says that the fifth wave, there is no limit to the height of it. Okay, so for that reason, even though we've already officially completed the 5, which usually means a 60% correction, there's a good chance. Now, I'm hoping that we're going to see a pump going into June. Now, the other part of my brain is saying to me, this looks too easy for the average person to really make money. And that generally doesn't happen. So what I'm thinking here is there is a chance that we could have a shakeout, one more shakeout, a nasty one, before this candle comes. Now, it needs to ultimately break above this little red line right here, the old tops.
That's at what, 72?
That's at 70, closer to 74. I think it's
Okay.
yeah, I think it's 70, 73.8 or something. The 72 is this one. See, I feel if we get through here in the next week before Sunday, that means that we're probably more than likely going to challenge the top. Now, when you challenge the top, it may take 1, 2, 3 challenges 3 times before we get through. If we get through and close above 75, close, okay, on the candle. When I say close, I mean the candle closing there on a day chart. I believe it's game on, and we're going to absolutely rip. Now, if it rips, it could last a week or 2 or 3, but the idea is I believe that June, you have to get ready for some kind of a signal that we're topping out, because right now my numbers suggest high 80s. Now, it could overshoot, and we could end up going close to 100.
Right.
However, I don't know if that's going to be the case, but I do expect a massive pump the next time. Right now, the Oracle's telling me high 80s, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, somewhere in around 90,000. But there's a chance that we'll get what I call a recycle on our numbers. And if we recycle, it means we could have a couple of more months of upside. Because right now, we knew back here that we've got till June, only until the end of June, the monthly candle in June. Right. So it's really treacherous in the sense that we could see some nasty volatility here either way. We might go for a crap. Now, what it does when the thing really goes for a dump at this point, because we've had trouble at this new top, a lot of people will panic. Emotions will kick in. They'll start selling. In turn, other people will see it, figure that's it. It's over. That will take the traders out of the market. And those are the guys that, in my opinion, not necessarily deserving of making the money, because they're not hodling and holding Bitcoin as an investment. They're just going and using leverage and trading the market. Yeah. So I am bullish. I am expecting that we could have I'd say there's a 70% chance that we will see 90,000 or close to it in the month of June.
Let me ask you this. If we do have a pullback, where do you see the next floor there? How far can we go back and test 20,000? Are we testing 38,000?
No, I don't think so. No, I believe there is a slim chance. Now, our buddy Joe will probably be watching the show. Do you remember we had a chat? I was on a show a few months back, 4 or 5 months ago, and he had mentioned that 38,000, and we were both on target. He had a dream of 38, and I said 38's a ceiling. We got to get through it. Yeah. And of course, we went through it. Now I believe there's a chance, if things get really ugly for a few weeks for whatever reason, and one of the main things that would cause this, JC, would be an actual stock market dump, not a crash, a massive dump, because any dump I see is going to be intervened by the Fed doing what they always do, coming in and buying the market because it's free money. Why not? Right. But it could spook people enough that they're going to sell silver, they're going to sell gold, they'll sell Bitcoin, they'll sell everything. Because nobody
can see a dump across the board.
It's panic, right? Yeah. But I think it'll be short-lived. Now, I believe if you said to me, what's the worst case scenario? I would say close to 40. But if it gets there, it'll be very, very quickly. It'll probably be while you and I are asleep.
You better have your buy orders ready.
Exactly. So that's a slim chance that happened. But I hope not. I'm hoping that during the month we're going to break out on Bitcoin and we're going to have a decent run. That's what I'm hoping.
Let me read you this thing again. I want to have your thoughts on this. It sounds very much with what you're picking up with the Oracle also. So the 3 months, he said 100K Bitcoin, 50K for AG for silver. He says, then breakdown starts in the institutions, quote unquote, that are derivative dependent. We can get into the OTCs here in a minute. But he says Bitcoin is going to test 74. Then floor there for a while. You were talking about that 74, interesting enough. He says, then jump along with silver as we go through various resistant points. He says there's a large jump at the end to take us over 100K to some degree. It may well go to 120 before any pullback. Again, here he's talking about Bitcoin. So fascinating. You guys seem to be tracking close to the same numbers here. He brought up Taiwan in that data set. Now, to what extent we're seeing all the saber rattling right now, China wanting to invade Taiwan. There was this infomercial by the PBOC and the Chinese Liberation Army just the other day. It's like a visualization of their attack on Taiwan. So, to what extent that's just smoke and mirrors show, or are we actually looking at an invasion? Cliff was suggesting that right now too, he's seen a drop in the availability of some chips that go into manufacturing. He says that could be causing some serious problems here in the States also moving forward. So where do you see Taiwan in the equation here before we end the show? Are we looking at a major disruption also to all of the chart patterns you just brought up here?
Yeah, again, I believe the whole thing is a plan, very elaborate plan that will play out. Yes, at some point, I definitely think Taiwan is going to be involved. I'm looking at it, JC, as bonfires right now. You've got the Ukraine, you've got the Middle East. Now you're going to have Taiwan and China. It's just going to escalate to the point where things just break down globally everywhere. I really believe that's the way they're doing it, because to bring in the new system, they're not going to be able to do it without a reason. And the reason is that the civilian people will be begging the governments to save their ass, because they just can't cope anymore. And it could drag out another couple of years. But I do think the escalation is coming this year, especially because of the election year. It's going to make things even more compound and more critical, because again, there's a chance between the grid failing, the power being down, the panic everywhere. It's just going to be total chaos, and that's just that's the way I see it coming. Yeah. And so far, I think basically it's worked out the way we've been looking at it for the past few years. That it's just continually in a very slow bleed, getting worse and worse.
The slow burn, yeah. I think it was Catherine Austin Fitz who said that the first time. I think it was 2010 or 11. People were expecting this big crash after 2008, after 2-3 years of 0% interest. Everybody was looking at this humongous crash, and she says, "Nope, it's going to be a slow burn, a long slow burn." I know she was right on the money for that. Here we are, over 10 years later, and we're still doing the long slow burn.
Well, here's the thing: people don't need to kind of grasp. A lot of people comment about the market's crashing. You have to understand that, like, most of the stocks in the market today are not traded by individuals. They're traded by funds. And the biggest bubble on the planet, one of the biggest bubbles, is the entire what we call passive investment sector, which is to do with ETFs and things like that. Now, while we're on the subject, I should bring this up before we finish. I have a concern with Bitcoin with the ETFs. Major. I don't know. We didn't talk about this, Uri, right?
No,
because you have to understand this, that the rules, I've read some more papers with regard to the ETF. There's a lot of gray areas there with regard to them actually holding Bitcoin day for day, dollar for dollar. That's not the case. Nope. They have a period of time where they can settle this. And that means that the fund managers are able to actually paper trade some of these ETFs, which means manipulation. Yep. Now, here's something for people to think about too. Let's look at the ETF. Let's say, for example, one of the big ETFs. You believe by buying the ETF that you can actually get Bitcoin, do you?
No. Well, you get exposure to Bitcoin. That's the promise.
Very different. You can get exposure. You get exposure to silver, LV. Exactly. Right. So here's my thing.
Yeah.
So we know there's 21 million limited Bitcoin in the world, maximum. That's all there ever was, right?
Yeah.
Now, going forward, if the ETF funds are purchasing Bitcoin for their clients, where's the money coming from?
Mm-hmm.
Who's presenting the money? The clients.
Yeah.
So the clients are giving these funds the money, and the funds in turn are buying Bitcoin, securing it in cold storage. Correct?
Right.
So at any point along the way, if the ETF were to fail, because they have fail-safe mechanisms where they can close the fund down, but they just have to pay people. But they won't be paying them in Bitcoin, JC. They'll be paying them in artificial paper dollars, worthless paper dollars. So where's the Bitcoin that was purchased with these dollars?
Yeah, it's $1 billion question.
Yeah.
Well, there's the manipulation. So, I was on a show with Big Swear maybe a year ago, maybe 2 years now. We were talking about the advent of these ETFs, and to some extent, we were excited about it because it would bring new legislations and new players into the Bitcoin market. Some of the bigger hedge funds, the institutions like the pension funds, like the big money into the place. So it's like, okay, that brings basically more demand. But at the same time, it brings more possibility for the manipulation of Bitcoin. So there's that. I don't know if you saw in the last 2 weeks through this SEC filing, most of the banks in North America, including here in Canada, had to divulge their Bitcoin ETF holdings, and they were all in it in a big way. So they appear to be jumping onto this. And it was funny to me because for the last number of years, we had the Jamie Dimons out there saying, oh, Bitcoin's a fraud. Anybody who buys it is going to be fired. And I'm like, look at these guys. They're the biggest buyers of the Bitcoin ETF while they're telling everybody else not to buy. So there seems to be a switch there happening, again, leading us into this brave new crypto world. And I wanted to end on this note here too. Somebody was suggesting here that we might see a 500% surge in Ethereum here amid the news of this ETF approval for Ethereum. Can you bring up the Ethereum chart there too and see where we're at with that? A lot of people are interested in perhaps where this baby is going to go here.
There you go. So we're looking at least, I would say, a $5,000 price in that same time period that we're looking at the move in Bitcoin. So yeah, I could see easily a $1,000 move very, very quickly in Ethereum, which is about a 20% move. I believe there's possibility that in the month of June, maximum June, July, if we manage to get July, I don't know if we will or not, about a 30% increase here. So we're looking at from 70 to 90,000 is about a 30% increase in Bitcoin. And from 3,000, are we at now 38, 4,000, 30%, $1,200. So yeah, 5,000 quite easily, I think we'll see in Ethereum as well. Yeah.
Wow. Fascinating.
I'm hoping for it. And I think anything other than that will just be a washout temporarily to knock a lot of people off their stools before it heads back up again. Yeah.
Right. For sure. Guys, if you're interested, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. I have these little brain farts, but I was talking about the ETFs now with this. So here's the big deal with the ETFs. People have to understand the average person that follows investment advice and the banks and people like that. You have to understand that these people, like the bank owners and that, they will not step outside of the SEC regulation. So in other words, Bitcoin, I'm not buying that. That's crap. I don't trust the exchanges and so on and so forth. But if the SEC approves it, now anybody can go buy $100 worth of Bitcoin or Ethereum. And who's not going to? Exactly. And the next time we FOMO out here and start seeing a 20, 30,000, guys go, get me some of that. Because you don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin for 70 or 80 or $100,000. You can put in 2,000 or 3,000. So think about the wall of money, and it's not just the U.S. brokerage firms. This is global.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yes, it's scary to think how big this explosion could be over the next few years, but it's just opening the doors right now. But it's going to get choppy, guys. It's not going to be an easy ride.
Oh, for sure. And maybe stay away from the ETFs and get the real thing and take it off the exchange and put it into your cold wallet storage, please.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
All right. We're going to be doing, guys, a Crypto Woo report here for the month of June. This is our forecast. I think we're recording that on Friday at 1 p.m. Just check out the schedule page on Beyond Mystic. I believe we're recording at 1 p.m. on Friday with Janine, guys, if you're interested in that. In the meantime, let me go back to our chart here. Let me see if I can bring this up. For the people who want to trade and want to learn a little bit more about your system and the services that you offer them, what can they find there at Bullshift?
I put that offer up for you today, JC. I put that on there for your new members. Our rates are 40% off. If they want to try it for 1 month, what they get basically is I do at least 3 to 4 updates per week. And that is updates on about 12 or 15 of the altcoins, Bitcoin, Ethereum as well, plus about 10 or 12 of the commodities. Right now, lots going on in the commodity market. Going forward with inflation, we're looking at things like the grains, the crude oil, the gold and silver. All of these are commodities, and you can trade that. You can trade it with options. I do about 3 updates a week. So during the week, what I'll do is focus on what's happening today, meaning the movers. And then on the weekend, I do a complete about an hour and a half update on where the markets are in general and where the Oracle numbers are showing. And that's for our subscribers. But you can try it for a month. If you don't like it, you can cancel. It's not for everybody, but a lot of people that we've been on board with are really enjoying it and they get a lot of use. I just generally give people an idea of a good area of support where you might want to buy something and a good area of overhead resistance, like those boxes, where you might want to consider taking profit. It's not trading advice, but hey, it's basically my beliefs in the Oracle, and I think it's got a good track record.
Yeah, and taking profit is a good thing.
Always
And it's always interesting to have better insights on when and how to do that. Folks, so give it a try here at bullshift2020.com. They just click on that. Do you want them to send you an email for the discount? How do you want to work that out?
They can just, they go right to here. They can go right to bullshift2020.com.
Okay.
And it's right there in front of you. It's called the Market Oracle. It's the actual program. And you'll sign up for that, and you'll get alerts in your inbox, and you just click on it, and it'll take you straight to the alerts as I do them.
Perfect. Very good. Hey, you remember when I was working at Queen's Park, I used to watch a BNN network. That's where I saw you for the first time. We're talking 20 years ago. You mentioned you were logging into YouTube. It's like there's a few of our audience members who recognize you from that long ago. But around, I think it was 2009 or maybe 2010, there was one of the other hosts on BNN, older lady, grayish hair. I don't know if you remember her name. I'm struggling to find her name now. But on the last day of her show, before she went to retire, the last 4 words or the last 3 words was "I love gold." And then they cut to black. So I'm like, she told you, like, you know what they say in the news? There's the beginning that's important and the end, and the rest is just filler, right? And so at the end of her career, she told you in 3 words, "I love gold."
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
I love that.
Maybe for the next show, I'll try to dig it up and see who that was. But I thought that was interesting.
There was one girl. She was a gorgeous looking lady. I shouldn't say that, but she was intimidating because she was beautiful, and her personality was too. But I see now she's gone. I saw an interview the other day where she's doing something else. But see, what happened was, I think in 2009, 2010, BNN was bought out by CTV. They used to be independent. And at that point, the changeover, and I just left my company, so I was retiring. I didn't get back involved with it. But good old days.
There were big changes at that point. All right, Marty, always fun to have you on. Thank you so much. We'll do this again here in the next couple of weeks as we continue to track our markets. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. If you like this video, of course, please hit the like button and share this with your friends. And of course, go check out bullshift2020.com. I love you guys. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Au revoir.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.